Hello, what is up everyone? Welcome back to my channel. I'm Financial Coach Jess and I talk all about things money, coaching, and entrepreneurship here on my channel. And whether we like it or not, PPP audits are coming in hot, and I think I was probably one of the first bookkeepers in my area to get served a subpoena this year, but I learned a lot and I want to share everything that I learned with you. Before we get started, I do want to disclose that absolutely nothing in this video is legal advice. I simply want to share my experience, the process, and what I learned personally. I'm actually interviewing my business lawyer here on my channel in just a few weeks, so drop any questions that you have for her down in the comment section below and I'll pass them on during the interview. While you're at it, don't forget to like this video. So let's back up for just a second and ask the question, what is PPP fraud and why is it happening? Of course, this all started in the financial madness that was 2020 when the government started giving out mass amounts of cash to small businesses. I remember in 2020, I went through the process to receive funds just so that I could answer questions that my financial coaching clients had or my bookkeeping clients had. And I went all the way through to the last page before you click submit, and I could not believe how fast and easy it was to receive funds. It was just enter some contact information and then you literally slide this button for how much money you want directly deposited into your account. You just slide the button and tens of thousands of dollars are immediately available to you. I remember thinking, literally, this is too easy. It has fraud written all over it. And that specific example wasn't PPP, it was some sort of other COVID relief because I didn't have to submit payroll information, but this is still why we are in this huge mess. There was no underwriting happening for any of these funds, any of these loans that were going out, which means basically the banks weren't doing any sort of double checking to make sure that the correct amount of funds went to qualified business owners. Remember 2008, the exact same thing happened when mortgage lenders were loaning money to people that did not qualify, and ultimately it crash the economy. And people are sinful. People, if they see free money, you just click a few buttons, submit a few documents, and you can have hundreds of thousands of dollars submitted directly into your account. They're not counting the cost, they're not thinking about the audits, they're not thinking about any of the consequences. It's especially unfortunate because by dangling this carrot in front of people and then basically just saying, Scout's honor, it really becomes a trap for individuals who are already struggling to make ends meet. The FBI agent that was leading the investigation told me that he thought that close to 50% of the PPP loans would in some way be considered fraudulent. 50%. I couldn't believe this. This absolutely blew my mind. And he went on to say, now I've got to clean all this up. I've got to find and secure these funds before they disappear. And I've got to see if people have to go to jail over this. And it really all goes back to the fact that the government significantly lowered the barrier to entry for these funds. It's really important for us to remember in a time like this that there's always free cheese in a mousetrap. Moving on to my experience with the subpoena. So I get a phone call from the FBI agent and he says that he needs to come to my house to serve me the subpoena. And I am freaking out, and I'm greatly condensing the story here, and I don't want to talk over and over again about how scared or uncomfortable I was. So just kind of assume that I'm pretty much freaking out the entire time. So I immediately emailed my lawyer, explained the situation, and I made the mistake of going online and Googling everything, like every possible scenario. Don't do this. It's not helpful. It's just like Googling your symptoms, like if you're coughing, you go online, WebMD is like, get in the casket. Like there's no hope here. Absolutely not. Don't do that. Just talk to a professional. And I actually want to pause the story right here and talk about how amazing my business lawyer is. And I highly recommend, if you have a business and you don't have a business lawyer, I highly recommend finding one that you trust. It's not nearly as hard or as intimidating as you might think. I actually hired Glenetta first to write up my business contracts, to write up my website disclaimer, privacy policy, terms and conditions, and this really sums up kind of the big stereotype I had to let go of was that lawyers only work with people who are in trouble. Here's how I got connected to Glenetta. So I'm in a Facebook group called ICAG, so it's I Know a Guy / Girl, and it's for my area, and it's where people can refer business and get, different referrals for things within their business or home projects or whatever. So I went into the group and said, hey, I'm looking for a business lawyer, website disclaimer, privacy policy, terms and conditions. I need all these things written up for my business. So I got several great referrals, and I started scheduling consultations with the referrals that I was getting. I make this sound very matter of fact. This is what I did. This is how I found her. But I was really nervous. I had never hired a lawyer before. I mean, this was like next level adulting that I didn't really want to do because it was so scary. It's not scary. And to be fully transparent, my experience has not been that expensive. And that's the second stereotype that I really had to let go of, was that lawyers are really expensive. And I was picturing in my head, running up expenses, a lawyer that would have to be on retainer, and it just wasn't true. I really hope that this helps dispel any fears that you have about hiring a lawyer for your business. You need to have those initial consultations with them just to get familiar and really see who is going to be a good fit for you. Glenetta had emailed me back the same day that I talked with the FBI agent, and she actually went above and beyond and rearranged her entire schedule so that we could talk right after I received the subpoena. And I was really blown away. She was so helpful and so kind about all of it. The FBI agent arrives, serves me the subpoena, and we chat for a little bit, but finally I let him know I'm not comfortable answering any in-depth questions about my client until I have my lawyer look over the subpoena. And really my thought process behind this was that I signed a non-disclosure with my client, and I don't want to do anything that's going to get me in trouble with them as well. I just wanted to do all of my due diligence before I opened the books. Fast forward to me meeting with the agent, and I'm cleared to open the books and answer questions, and he was so nice, and I'm really blessed that he was extremely kind, took some extra time even to explain the process to me and answer questions that I had to. After I answered all of his questions, I had quite a laundry list of things that I needed to gather for the investigation, and this included the employee list, payroll reports, and that's bi-weekly or monthly, end of month profit and loss statements, end of month balance sheets, personal and business tax returns, engagement letters, contracts, correspondence, invoices sent for services provided, and then also payments received. And really the records that I needed to collect for all of this, a timeline, needed to go back to 2011 or when I started working with the client, which was still several years. From this list of things that they needed from me for the investigation, we can really conclude two things. Number one, they were trying to trace the money. The agent even told me that their biggest priority was finding the funds and securing it while they continued the investigation. And then number two, they also wanted to make sure that I had not received any of the money or was in on it in any way. This was a lot to gather, and of course I wanted to double check every little thing if this was going to be used in federal court, but after I talked to the FBI agent, I knew time was of the essence, and so he said, okay, great, I'll come back tomorrow to pick all this up, and I basically worked around the clock right up to the deadline to make sure that everything was 100% correct. I looked through everything 5 times over, and I handed it all off to the FBI agent. I also don't think that a 24-hour turnaround time is typical, but that was just my experience. A big question from the Bookkeeper Launch Facebook group that I received and that I wanted to address was what tipped off the FBI to this fraud, because it wasn't an audit. And this is a great question, and very simply, the business owner had submitted payroll reports for the PPP loans, and they were all the same for multiple companies. So she ran one payroll report and then changed the name at the top for all the different companies so she could receive PPP funds for all the companies, whether they had payroll or not. Of course, in a digital age, the agents don't have to sit there and sift through millions of documents. The software can basically just alert them and say, hey, all of these payroll reports are completely identical. Let's take a second look at this. And this is just my experience. There might be other red flags for other embezzlement situations, but this is just what happened in my case. Another question from the group that I wanted to address was, did you see anything that made you suspicious or anything that tipped you off prior to the FBI contacting you? I think all of our mindsets toward our clients, it has to be trust as the default. I mean, otherwise we would be paranoid all the time. And I actually read a book about this by Malcolm Gladwell called Talking to Strangers, where he really looks at people as a whole and looks at their trusting bias and why that is innately in us. And it's a really, really good book, highly recommend. And the conclusion that he came to was basically, if we didn't have this trusting bias, we would drive ourselves crazy. The brain actually weighs that getting burned by someone and having your trust broken by someone is not as bad as looking over your shoulder every single day for your entire life. This is just how we were created. With that in mind, some of my clients are more savvy business owners. Some of my clients are content to be just kind of a mediocre business, living paycheck to paycheck, being in the red for months at a time. And so it's a very gray area, and it's very hard for me to discern what is just neglectful business behavior and what is actually fraud. We can't beat ourselves up because we aren't agents waiting for our clients to commit crimes against the federal government, but we can put safeguards into our business to further protect ourselves and possibly hold our clients to a higher standard as well. So let's talk about what safeguards and what things I had in my business to protect myself, and then also what safeguards I added as a result of all of this. Number one, and possibly the most important thing that I did, was that I was very careful not to have usernames, passwords, physical copies, or access to any money of any of my clients. And I do have some view-only access to get things like statements or check images or whatever, but I was very, very careful not to have access to any money of any of the businesses that I manage. Safeguard number two is that I have error and omission insurance, and this is pretty standard for, I would say all, but probably most bookkeepers. Number three is I don't do any payroll for any of my companies, and doing payroll is not necessarily a bad thing as a bookkeeper, but it does just put a little bit more liability on your shoulders. I actually outsource all of my payroll for my clients to Gusto. Number four is that I have lawyer drafted contracts that all of my clients sign, and at the time some of my contracts were a little bit outdated, some of them needed to be updated, and I'll get to that in a second, but I was very careful that no services began before those contracts were signed by my clients. These four things really helped me create a solid foundation to help reduce my risk and keep my liability as low as possible. Like I mentioned, I learned a lot throughout this process, and here are some things that I changed in my business immediately as a result. Number one, the very next day, I sent a disengagement letter to one of my clients that was also kind of in this gray area of neglectfully running the business and receiving funds. I was a little bit uncomfortable about all of it, and so literally very next day, I sent him a disengagement letter. Number two, I sent updated contracts to all of my clients for them to sign ASAP. And number three, I've actually gone round and round with QuickBooks Online about this, but I finally decided enough was enough. I pulled the plug on my accountant account, and I'm in the process now of transferring all of my clients over to a new accountant account because QuickBooks Online wouldn't let me let go or basically cut ties with past businesses that I'm no longer doing business with. Like I said, this is an issue I've had with QuickBooks Online forever, but they will not budge on this. But when I get added to a client's account, either I'm sending a proposal and I need to see the book so I can send an accurate proposal, or I do some cleanup work and then we part ways after that, I have no power to take myself off of the account. And this is a huge liability issue. If the scenario is the same, the FBI needs into the account without the business owner knowing, like it was in my case, they could see their account on QuickBooks, they could see that I'm the accountant on the account, and they could come to me and I'd have to do this process all over again for a business that I'm not even associated with. This is crazy to me. And like I said, I mean, I have gone round and round with QuickBooks Online about this. They are not going to budge, and I have no power to take myself off of their account. The business owner has to be the one to take me off the account. There is so much liability in this, so I said, forget this, I'm deleting the old email, everything will be basically completely gone, and I'll have my new account and a clean slate. In the last segment here of the video, I want to talk about the future changes that I'm going to be making in my business. And number one is, I know I was really picky about my bookkeeping clients that I allowed into my business before, but now I'm going to be like extra picky, because with this client that I had that was under investigation, I felt like personally I was always more invested in her business than she was. And that really should have been a big red flag from the beginning. But I want businesses that are wanting to grow and excel. There's so many businesses that need help, but there's just not a lot of businesses that are willing to make the changes and actually accept the help. Future change number two is that if the government ever gives out this kind of mass cash, again, without underwriting, I'm going to be more proactive and really spell it out to my clients, the risks and what they can expect as a result of the relief or the PPP loans or whatever it might be. And future change number three is no more phone calls. You cannot document what is said over the phone. So to further protect myself, all client bookkeeper correspondence is going to be over email. The only really big exception to this would be if I'm doing some sort of coaching session with the client. This covers any remaining liability that I can think of. I'm sure you guys can think of more, so leave me down in the comments below. How are you protecting yourself as the business owner or as the bookkeeper? I hope that this video has been extremely helpful for you and really helped you see that there's nothing to be afraid of as long as you are doing your due diligence and putting those safeguards in place within your business to protect yourself. Like I said earlier, I will be interviewing my lawyer to get her perspective on all of this, so if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to my channel, click the bell so you are notified when new videos go live, and I'll see you guys in the next one.